Good morning again and welcome. It's our second day for the PIOB, but the first day of public meetings. So Gabriella, we're very happy to have you and your team first. I also just want to say welcome to Paul Mante from the monitoring group. Thanks for joining us, Paul. And Janine, we missed you yesterday. We know you had a clash, and thank you. It's good to have you here. Martin pointed out to me it wasn't a strategy, but we have Begonia standing between Mark from the UK and Janine from the Netherlands to avoid any football hooligans. But you do know that you and Begonia will clash soon with Spain. So we hope we have peace when it comes to the sports front today. Yes, we also have Ken. Ken, we're missing you here, Madrid, but nice to see you. We've got two big screens in front of us where we can see you. So welcome, and it's good to have you with us.
Pleasure as well, Linda. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, Gabriella, thank you. We had maybe I'll give you a few comments and then first let you go through your presentation. We had, as we always do as a board, we had a preparation session, and in there we spend a little bit of time with as a board, but also with our observer, looking at what came out of the meeting. We've agreed beforehand, as you know, that we're going to obviously focus today on where you are with sustainability and experts, because it's such an important project. I'm sure you're going to tell us a little bit about firm culture and governance and just a little bit about the PI definition. So maybe just a couple of points on the things that came out of our discussion. I'm going to take 5 minutes maybe just to talk about it at the high level, because I think if there's something that you pick up, you might want to, as you do your presentation, deal with it at the same time. So on sustainability and experts, we're very what's the right word, comfortable to see that there's a really big effort coming right from the leadership between you and Tom on dealing with collaboration, you're collaborating, dealing with the common definitions, terminology, and so on. And it is, we've said it many times, and I know you're very aware of it. You also hear it from the stakeholders. It is very important that those definitions land in a place where there's consistency. Especially because there's different timelines, and it will be really important to get the assurance standard approved by the board, most likely certified by the PIOB, but we know that you're working on all of those things. So that's good, and we would like to also hear from you when it comes to that. I just want to check my notes if there was anything else. We're just looking forward to seeing your progress, where you are. We have obviously seen the observation memo. What are the potential stumbling blocks to get you to where you want to be? It sounds as if it's just now a matter of putting your heads down and finalizing that. Firm culture and governance, it's early days, so we won't talk too much about that, but I do believe it's something that's worth a little bit of time at our board meeting today. It's a really important project, and we've all said it many times. It is really important, and I think difficult to scope it. We saw that you're looking at this potentially some things that must be done in the shorter term, which possibly makes sense, and some things that maybe needs much more long-term focus and long-term information gathering. Ultimately, in our minds, we keep on saying it is important to understand what is the problem, the public interest risk that needs to be solved, and there are many public interest risks that potentially need to be solved, but what's within the scope of IESBA and the code. And putting it differently, it's almost about how can you positively change behavior through the ethics code and the independence and other requirements. Somebody said yesterday, when it comes to these complex matters, it's very important, and it's a Stephen Covey's expression, to begin with the end in mind. We sort of want to know what the end game is, so that it can be solved. And I know that's how you're looking at it, also from a risk analysis type of perspective. So maybe just those are the general points just on firm culture and governance. I think those are probably the things that I want to raise in the beginning and then hand over to you. What I would suggest, Gabriella, as you do your presentation, you decide where the appropriate point is to pause for questions, because else we might derail what you want to say with all our interjections in between. So when you think it's a logical point, let's stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair Linda. Thank you very much to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here again. It's always a real pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with this group, clarify, explain, update, but also receive precious insights and suggestions with respect to the work that we are doing. So thank you very much for this opportunity. This presentation and this update to the PIOB happens in a moment where we are working hectically in very many directions and topics, but mostly on sustainability, which keeps being the main area of focus now and of work, with a view to finalize the standards as committed in December, and therefore meet the requests that we heard clearly 18 months ago to be ready by the end of 2024. So this is our main purpose, but then, as Linda already mentioned, there are other topics which deserve some attention and for which it would be very good. We would very welcome suggestions from the PIOB, but also clarifying anything that may be less clear at this stage. So thank you for that opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to lead in terms of when we stop. But I think that what makes sense is after each topic. But of course, if there is anything when I'm presenting that you want to ask or that I need to clarify, please do. So thank you for that, and I'll start with if this moves. Okay. So this is a little bit the agenda that Linda already mentioned. Sorry, before I start, yes, Ken is in New York attending this meeting at 3 a.m. So I think that we should be, myself especially, thankful to Ken. And of course, if you allow, if there is anything that I think that it should.
Thank you so much for that, Ken. You look very wide awake and much more perky than we do at our age if we have to get up so early. So thank you, appreciate it.
I'm not sure if it's get up early or go sleep late, but something in between. Okay, so the first topic is on sustainability, and this slide, this first slide speaks about the efforts that the IESBA has done over the consultation period to respond to a clear call and request for the IESBA to make sure that the exposure draft would be made known, that stakeholders would be aware of the exposure draft, and therefore that we would receive meaningful, substantive responses that could help us shape the final standards. This is not about the number of responses. This is really about making sure that stakeholders are involved, that we capture the main concerns and the best suggestions, and therefore that the last version, the final version of the standards, will respond to stakeholders' needs. I'm not going to go into the details. I think that the slide speaks by itself. There were global webinars, there were in-person seminars, and we reached out, in a rough calculation, more than 7,000 stakeholders over this period of 3 months when the consultation was out. This was really significant, and I'd like just to raise one or two specific topics here. One, because sometimes there is a wrong idea that we are neglecting some areas and some regions of the globe. And I'd like to make a special reference to Africa, where we had an action and initiatives which were very unusual for us, but we really managed to reach out to a very significant number of African stakeholders, with the help of UNCTAD, which supported us in organizing a lot of things, also with the ARP, where we are now members. But just to mention that this is not, we are not neglecting the South and Africa, on the contrary, and it's very impressive to see the interest that these topics are raising there, and the sophistication of the stakeholders in some areas with respect to the knowledge of the sustainability standards and interest in getting more information and training, if possible, for their adoption. So I don't know if there is any question on these slides, but this is really impressive. I must say that this big number comes mostly from Australia and Japan, where we had big seminars with many people in person and virtually. Some of them in Australia with more than 2,000 people attending. So it's, I think that we responded to that request, and something that we are sure now is that we made what we needed to do and more to make sure that everybody was aware of the consultation. The result, or part of the result, because again, the numbers don't say everything, there is much more beyond the numbers, but anyway, we received 93 responses. This is a very unusual number for the IESBA. I think that we never had a consultation with this number of responses. But more than the number of responses, I'd like to highlight the fact that we received responses from a very wide range of stakeholders from very many different backgrounds, and also that some of these responses, many of them, are collective responses, and so they represent, in some cases, hundreds of other stakeholders. So the number is what it is. The numbers are what they are. But again, I think that we managed to meet the request to go beyond the profession and make sure that not only we had non-professional accountants, the ones that are providing sustainability assurance, responding, but also international organizations, regulators, CFO Alliance. I'd like to highlight that as well, because it's a very, very difficult group to reach out to, and we managed to have this International CFO Alliance, which represents a significant number of CFOs responding to the consultation. The International Bar Association as well, and CTAD, etc. So I think that this is also, this speaks by itself about the impact that the consultation made. Now, we are now still in the process of analyzing the responses. We did not manage to finalize that analysis for many reasons. The substance, the substance that we will get from these responses is not yet completely fully known, but we got some very substantive responses from most of these stakeholders, which only makes the work that we are doing now more interesting and valuable, but also more difficult because they have to be seen very carefully and addressed in a very careful way. So in this period of the exposure draft, what we got as the main feedback was a substantive agreement and support to the proposal. Very much in line with what we had at the start before we started drafting the standards, when we organized the 4 global roundtables. The topics for further attention are more or less the ones that had already been flagged before. So nothing is surprising here, and there is a very significant, consistent support for the proposal for the IESBA to advance standards on sustainability reporting and assurance, and to offer a baseline for the ethics and independence framework, global framework for sustainability reporting and assurance. The topic of profession agnostic, as you know, caused some questions and some reluctance among some groups of stakeholders at the start is, I believe, significantly has been overcome. There are still some very well-identified groups or areas or organizations which are still questioning a little bit, but I would say that in general we have a very strong support for this profession agnostic approach. Maybe we'll have to change the name, because the name, I think, it's what's causing more problems. People don't like the profession agnostic. I understand, we can call it any other thing. Anyway, this is not a word that we use in the standards. It's just how we classify them. The term was suggested by the FSB long ago and then adopted by the IOSCO. So it's not our term. It's something that we got from the others. The key topics for further IESBA attention, definitions, Linda already mentioned that. The scope was also subject to some comments and requests for further attention. And then some independence considerations, group assurance engagements, value chain, and also non-assurance services, which is a topic where some of the stakeholders had relevant considerations. And communications of no-CLAR, and surprisingly or not, whilst the no-CLAR standard in the past caused stakeholders some reactions in terms of accepting the no-CLAR standard, now we are being asked to do more than we had proposed in terms of no-CLAR. There were, of course, calls for further coordination with the with the IESB, but in general, we can say that the key topics for further attention were in line with the feedback that we also had from the outreach, from the individual outreach with stakeholders. On the experts, which is, as you know, a project which is very much connected with the sustainability project, there was a very robust support with to the proposal, with also some topics flagged for further IESBA attention, consistent of definitions with the IESB, so again the same topic, and some other technical topics like the CCO, competence, capabilities, and objectivity for the external expert, and on the work of the external expert. So topics that we are addressing now, carefully, seeing how it works together with the sustainability proposal, but also with IESB terms and definitions. Linda, you asked me to mention the topic of coordination as being one of the topics that has been at the center of discussion of the PIOB. For the time being, because we'll have a specific dedicated session to this topic, what I would say is that we are, of course, coordinating, trying and being, I think, very successful in achieving common definitions, or at least very, very similar definitions. But above all, beyond the definitions themselves, the words, making sure that the two systems, the two frameworks are interoperable. Do not create any inconsistency, any contradiction, and do not leave any space open for doubts and uncertainties. That's what we are doing with a focus on the substance of the interoperability of the proposals more than on the formal, how it formally appears. We will see in the coordination session where we are at this point in time, but the work has been advancing fast, intensively, with the two staffs very, very, very much involved in this exercise, which has been a very intense exercise for both of the teams, but on which I can say that we are advancing successfully and with optimism with respect to where we land in some time now. The way forward for this project on sustainability is here. So from June to August, the team, or the end of August, the team will be happily, and the team and the task forces and the board will be happily working over the summer intensively on the coordination topics, meetings, etc. Some outreach meetings, but I don't expect the outreach over August to be very intense. I think that we are now in July finishing this for the time being, and it's time to go back to the office and the silence of our laptops and work on the analysis of the responses, because in September we need to know what's in these responses, if possible, and make a proposal to the board, first draft of the final standards, the first read. That's what's going to happen in September, and then October and November, of course, the task force will work, the task force and the staff will work on the results of this discussion in September with a view to having these standards finalized, approved and finalized by December. We hope that but this is just hope, I can't grant anything, that between September and December it will be a slightly lighter work in terms of finalizing the standards, and our aim and objective is to make it as close as to the final version as possible in September, so that we can also use those months to start preparing other documents that we'll have to prepare to finalize the standards. So this is the way forward and the timeline that we are sticking to. And I'll suggest that I stop here and see if there is any question or any comment that any of the PIOB members would like to make.
Thank you, Gabriella. And while I wait for cards, maybe just two comments or questions from my side. Just considering, I understand that you're still busy looking at the responses and analyzing it, but what are the sort of the key themes and the key topics that you pick up from that and from the 7,000 people that you reached out to? And then the other one is just on considering the timeline and the lack of maybe certainty exactly of what's coming out of the comment letters now that you're going to bed down, hopefully, and anchor by the September board meeting. What are the risks of, I'm not suggesting that there's necessarily a problem, but are there any risks of the changes being so severe that it might call for re-exposure?
I think that well, from what we know now, I think that risk doesn't exist. So responding to the last question, we don't see anything in the responses and the outreach that we have undertaken that suggests or even makes it cross our mind that it would be necessary to re-expose. The main topics that were identified are fortunately very consistent. We know, we knew already a little bit, but we know what are the topics that, which are the topics that deserve our attention. I'd say that on the ethics standards for sustainability reporting, it's very, very consensual. There are some tweaks that we need to make in some areas, but we don't see anything special, except this request to go bolder with respect to no CLAR. On the IESBA, the ethics and independence standards for sustainability assurance, we have a few comments and a few concerns consistently on the same topics and areas. Group sustainability assurance engagements, value chain entities, non-assurance services, and some of them on fees, but not that relevant. I'd say that these three, group assurance engagements, value chain, and non-assurance services, are the three topics which are raising more concerns. I'd also say that some of the concerns related with group assurance engagements and value chain entities had a little bit to do, or very much to do, with the coordination and interoperability and consistency with IESBA, because when we made these proposals, the IESBA had not developed yet provisions in this area on the audit side. So there was the sense that something was missing and that it was difficult to make these independence considerations and requirements understandable and applicable without necessary baseline. We had discussed that at the board. We were aware of that risk. That was a decision that was made to see what stakeholders would say. We felt that we needed to move with that area, because otherwise it would be in 5 years' time, which would be a little bit too late. So, fortunately, I think that everything is progressing very well on both sides. The baseline, or the substance that was requested, is being provided. And at the same time, we are advancing on this exercise of collaboration and consistency with IESBA. So hopefully, but we never know, because these are very sensitive. These two areas are very, very sensitive, because they bring very many problems, or they bring difficulties to the firms in the implementation of these requirements. So they are delicate, sensitive topics. But anyway, I think that the way this is progressing is leaving me very confident that there won't be major issues, and above all, that there will be no reason for a re-exposure. We are not suggesting anything that is beyond the boundaries of what we had suggested. Same on non-assurance service. Non-assurance service, the problem is just a list of prohibited services, which some of the stakeholders consider that should be a little bit refined, having into consideration the specificities of the sustainability assurance services, with slightly different opinions from different stakeholders. So we have to do a little bit of work there. On the communication of NOCLA, which was the other topic, what we are doing is to respond to the request to go a little bit further than we were considering, because, as you know, what we are proposing is that in certain circumstances, the auditor considers reporting, and in some areas, some stakeholders, namely IESBA, wanted a little bit more, and wanted to remove the word consider and report. So we have already had the opportunity to explain, namely to C1 in Montreal, why this has to be like this. We can't go much further than this, but we are adding some additional situations where the auditor does not have to consider, he or she has to report. Not in all situations, but addressing carefully which are the situations where this happens. So I hope that this responds to your question, Linda.
Yes, thank you. Robert.
Thank you, Chair, and morning, Gabriella. Thank you very much for the first part of the presentation. Can I just ask a couple of questions in relation to the profession agnostic dimension of all of this, which is something that is very important for all of us to keep in mind, given the very important public interest considerations that are involved in having a range of professions involved in providing assurance on sustainability information. So there really is, isn't there? There's an important interest in having a common understanding across professions of the independence requirements and consistent application. It's very good to see the work that you're doing on NOCLA and what you've just been explaining, very helpful to us. I think those of us who were around when the original NOCLA provisions were put into the code will recall that there's a natural resistance, sometimes understandable, sometimes not, on the part of professionals who are challenged about extending beyond their client confidentiality obligations, and so it's very important for the IESBA to continue to explain and the reasons for there being NOCLA provisions in there. So I very much support you in that. And it's good to see you drilling down into other facets such as the non-assurance services area as well, which is vitally important when it comes to this common understanding as to why what independence is all about and why it's important. And we know from experience, don't we, that non-assurance services are an important risk area. So that's very good. You did we're aware that you've done a lot of work and made some great progress with the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, and be interested in a thought about how that is progressing. If you could just comment on that briefly. And you did just refer in your presentation before to, I think you said, some groups and organisations that are still asking some questions. So it might be helpful if you could just inform the board about how you see the current state of play in relation to professions other than the accountancy profession coming on board with your with these independent standards that you're putting out. And then similarly, just in relation to experts, it's very heartening to see the broad support for the experts ED, because a lot of work was done on that, as we're all aware. But again, the public interest is to ensure that those who are performing external expert services for assurance teams do meet those same standards, and that there's a common understanding as to what those standards are, particularly when those external experts are from other professions. So again, just a quick comment from you, if you may, just about your level of confidence that the importance of this common understanding across professions is going to be reflected in the implementation of the new requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Robert. I did not want to go into details on the work that we are doing with the IAF and on non-professional accountants, but I think this is really important because this has been a topic that has been discussed around this table since the very start of this project, and with support, strong support, I would say, from PIOB. So you asked me about my perspective of how this is going to evolve and where we are. And my response is I see it with an informed optimism, which means that I'm very optimistic, but I'm aware, very aware of the work that we still have to do for this to be successful and to address it's not issues, it's not difficulties, but specificities of this very new environment that we are going to. So the work with the AIF goes on smoothly and very successful. It's really a matter, I would say, of pride, because I think that 1 year ago, none of us would have imagined that we would have achieved this level of consistency, AIF adopting our standards, making sure that non-professional accountants will be using the IESBA, which closes and responds to a concern that was there in the market about unlevel playing field and all these things. It's done. It's done. They will adopt the code. They have already committed to do it. They are working very, very, very intensively on understanding, trying to start producing some guidance, etc. So I'm very optimistic, happy, and happy because this responds to a public interest concern, which was to provide the market with something that would protect investors against independence issues, etc., from the providers, irrespective of who is providing the service. It's a new focus, a different focus, not on who is providing the service, but a focus on the service. If the service is provided to the user, it's important that the user is equally protected, irrespective of who is providing the service. Now, there are still many decisions to be made by jurisdictions. I'm not saying that everywhere non-professional accountants will be providing sustainability assurance services. This is a decision for the local decision makers, politicians, regulators, whatever, but where they will be allowed, there is a standard that covers everybody. With respect to the common understanding of the independence requirements and etc., of course the auditors are much more familiar with this language, with these requests, with the reasons, with the difficulties, etc., than the non-professional accountants. The IESBA is working with them very, very intensively. We are speaking with them, I mean, I would say on an almost weekly basis, doing work with them, helping them themselves, starting to produce some documents and some drafts to explain what's this of adopting the independent standards. But our plan is to move forward with guidance, which of course will help auditors and non-auditors, professional accountants and non-professional accountants. It's something that will be helpful for everybody, but of course we'll have to have a specific focus. I'm not saying an additional focus, it's a specific focus on non-professional accountants because they may need a special attention with understanding the system, how it works, what's in there. I must say, and responding also to your question about how I do see this, I must say that I'm impressed by the level of sophistication of some of these entities, and the real openness and ability that they have shown to understand things and move forward. And my perception is that this is going to be mostly for the bigger ones who have this capacity of including embedding the standards, understanding the standards, applying the standards. So the market will work, will do its job, but I'm not concerned at all. I'm just concerned about the work that it will mean for everybody, for them and for us, but we have to take it right.
So just to clarify on that, so you refer to some of the larger entities doing this assurance work already outside the accounting profession. You've been talking to those like Accountability and others. So you can see the opportunity for those organisations to set the example perhaps for others Is that in terms of smaller providers who perhaps don't have the same understanding about the importance of independence when it comes to providing assurance on sustainability information?
Yeah, I think so, Robert. I think this is going to be a journey. This is at the start. It will be, I think, for the bigger ones, and it's them who are playing with us. Many, I don't want to say many names, but ISO, DNV, Bureau Veritatis, etc. They sit at our table. They come to our round tables. They visit us. They are in constant contact with us, and with a very open and agile, I must say, attitude with respect to this. There are some interesting movements. For instance, we received a delegation from Korea last 2 weeks ago. In Korea, as you know, 95% of us, the sustainability assurance reports are made by non-professional accountants. And they came to New York and they want to work with us and with accountability and make sure that everything is consistent. They don't want any gaps and the transition for them, it's going to be a transition, but they want it to be smooth and to make sure that they do what they need to do. So we see things starting to fit into a meaningful system.
Thank you very much for the update. I think, Chair, that's very important to hear, and particularly about the Koreans. Great to hear that, because we've been aware for a long time that there's a lot of voluntary assurance being done by non-accountants in Korea, and so perhaps that's picking a winner as well in terms of using inviting the Koreans to assist the board in promoting the message across other jurisdictions as well. So it's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for the update.
And if I just may add, just using Korea as an example, they're not just talking about, they understand what's happening in the code level. They're interested in training and education. So they want it to be impactful and effective. So I think it's a positive step.
Thanks for that. I'm going to take questions from Begonia and from Philippe. And then so I'm just going to check if there are any last questions on sustainability that we can move on. So Begonia, Philippe and Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Gabriela, for the detailed explanation. My question is about it's also related with the independence that Robert was making. It's about the common letters. I know you are revising them, and you are now learning what the stakeholders say about it. But are there any concerns about the lack of independence requirements for non-accountants assurance providers, because they are not covered by, unless they are public interest engagements that are covered by Part 5, Part 4B is not affecting them. So that's my question. Is there any concern about level playing field because these other non-accountants assurance providers that are not doing public interest engagements, they don't have any specific requirement to my recollection of the situation. I know you were thinking about revising Part 4B, but even when we were in the December meeting, I was questioning, this is not a public interest issue because it is covered in Part 5. Is there any reason for revising Part 4B, yes or not? But are there concerns by the constituents that there will be different independence requirements?
Let's just take all the questions if it's okay with you. Thanks, Gabriela. Philippe?
Thank you, Chair. Gabriela, just a simple question regarding the comment letters received. I think you feel confident about the implementation of the standards and so on, and particularly to non-professional auditors, let's say. I'd like to know where, in the view 3, when you report, the stakeholder category, where do you think are the non-professional providers of assurance? Because, as you know, there is a strong expectation from issuers, notably in some areas. I'm sure you heard European issuers to push, to open the market, to create a new market, not only for, I would say, financial auditors, okay? So to what extent are you convinced that in the comment letters you received, you have the voice of these new players on the market? Because when I consider the categories, you know, I'm a bit afraid that you have heard, in fact, a sort of silent voice of these new players. I don't know where they are. Or maybe you have reached them in the outreach program, and you have heard comments that you can, you know, analyze. But here in the comment letters, how can we feel that there is a, you know, a voicing of the concerns of this new category of players on the market?
Thanks, Philippe. And then I'm just going to go to Mark and then back to you. Thanks, Gabriella.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Yeah, I'd just like to look ahead a little bit on sustainability, because obviously it will be very important to the public interest that that the standard is rolled out effectively. Therefore, the sort of communication and implementation is handled well. I've obviously read your report, Gabriella, and I see there, quite rightly, you point out that IFAC under the service level agreement are sort of responsible for communications, etc. But I also note that you're looking to hire a strategic communications director. And I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more colour around why it's necessary, you think, to make that hire, and also the extent to which you intend to sort of roll your standard out jointly with the IESBA standard and share resources in doing that when it comes to it next year.
And maybe just in that, Gabriella, obviously we're going to spend some time in our executive session just on resources and budgets and things like that. So I don't think we need to go into that level of detail here, but it would definitely be useful if we think about the public interest of your thinking and the rollout and what you want to cover and, you know, that sort of thing. Not so much of how you spend the money. It's really what's the objective and thinking when it comes to training, education, awareness. Thanks. And then after that, if there's anything else you want to say about sustainability, let's do that and then wrap up and move on to the next topic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to try to be brief with these questions and my responses. So, Begonia, part 4B, going direct to the point. I think your question is if there are concerns that before part 4B is subject to some revision, which is the project. I'll see. I can't speak about the future, but it's in our project to think and consider reviewing part 4B to make sure that non-PAs who are not captured by the current proposal will be captured under part 4B. There will be some time, which is a time that I think the market needs to adapt to this new framework, where, of course, there will be a slightly different situation for those non-PAs who are captured by part 5, which are the most, working in the most relevant reports, and the others. There will be a difference, just like there is a difference between the auditors providing financial statements and the auditors non-providing financial statements. There will be some difference, but we aim at covering and closing that difference very soon with the revision of part 4B. It's a gradual work and approach. It was not possible to do it.
My question was about the comment letters. If comment letters mention some concerns about level playing field during that period.
Begonia,
you don't know, I know, but
okay,
if you can explore that when you revise the full comment letters.
Okay, I can't give you a full response by now. I haven't heard anything specifically about the topic. I don't know if Ken is listening as if there is anything that I'm missing, but I think that for the time being, I don't think it's an issue which is high in the responses. We heard it. I remember hearing those comments in Canada, because the sustainability reporting and assurance is not mandatory in Canada, and so they were like, what are we going to do with your code? But we must always think that there is always an option for the local jurisdictions to add to the code and make it mandatory or cover voluntary reports or whatever. I mean, this is a baseline which does not prevent jurisdictions from making their own decisions to adapt and make it more effective in their jurisdictions according to the local frameworks and rules and etc. But yes, in the comment letters, I don't think that there was something very visible and specific about that topic. Philippe, the voice of non-PAs in the comment letters, in the comment letters. Is that your question? Well, in terms of the voice of non-PAs, depending on what we understand for non-PAs, but if we understand them just as the other assurance providers and accreditation bodies, we had 3 responses, but one of them is from the AIF, which represents more than 100 accreditation entities. And we know, because we follow that there was a process, and a complex process of collecting feedback, discussing, approving by the board of IIF, etc. So it's really a collective answer of more than 100 accreditation entities. And what the feedback that we get is that they are very happy to adhere to this project, to use the IESBA code. They need help and guidance and training to make sure that they get everything right, that they understand things as they should be understood. So their requests are mostly about help us understanding. We want to do it. We want to do the right thing. This is what we have heard above all. And not very many concerns about complexity or about anything that that doesn't fit their needs. I don't know if this responds to your question. Mark, completely different question. Communications director and communication, etc. Well, but I'm very happy to respond to that question, because of course it has all to do with this. What you have seen, reaching out to stakeholders, having 93 comment letters, but above all, and again, I don't care that much about the numbers, I care about the substance. We started at a very, very, very difficult point. IESBA, we made a very quick exercise of, IESBA is not known. The code is not very much known. The sustainability standards of IESBA were not, even with all the global roundtables, we were afraid, and I think that we had reasons to be afraid, that many people hadn't heard, even at the firms, hadn't heard about this project. I'm not going to share, we can share it during the coffee break, some comments that I heard in some places which were frightening, revealing a high level of lack of knowledge about what the IESBA does and what the IESBA was doing on sustainability. This is not compatible for sustainability and for the rest. If we really think that ethics is a matter that matters, and I, of course, think that it's the matter that matters the most, because the problems the problems that we all want to avoid, the public interest issues that we want to address, start and exist mostly, predominantly because of ethical failures and independence issues. We need to do something to make sure that this message, this important message for the public interest, makes its way and goes through and is known and etc. This was not compatible with the capacity that we had in terms of reaching out to stakeholders, addressing the right stakeholders, using different channels to reach to stakeholders, to give the message in an appropriate way, which is a very difficult thing, and I think that there will be other moments in this meeting where we will go to that topic. Be sure that the message is passed in an understandable way, that people get not only the content, but the objective of what we are doing. And this is very difficult, and this is not anything that we were being able to do in an appropriate way. So the response to a request that the IESBA got from this group, from IOSCO, from everybody, since I joined the IESBA, which is make sure that you get involved with the appropriate number of stakeholders, with diverse stakeholders, that you get the message through, etc. To respond to that, we need to have tools and instruments and the right capacity, which we did not have. So when we were about to finalize the exposure draft, the draft standards, it was even my board who was very clear that we can't take the risk of having made such an effort that we have never done before with developing this exposure draft in such a tiny, tight deadline, timeline, with so scarce resources, with all the board involved, with all the discussions, etc., and then when it's ready, don't have the means to make it be understood, known, and collect the necessary feedback. This was an absolute sign of lack of success of what we were doing. And it's not about success, it's not about fame, it's not about nothing of that, it's really about the public interest. If we believe that ethics is important, and there is a long way to be made, I tell you, Mark, there is a very long and hard way still to be made for stakeholders, investors, the firms, etc., understand and capture and embed the real importance of ethics and independence. So this is, to respond to you, Linda, this is the public interest issue that is behind a very strategic approach. Yeah, we call it communications, but don't get me wrong, don't get us wrong. It's not communications about, LinkedIn and things like that, which is important. It's really about setting a professional strategy about how to get the IESBA message through. This is what's behind all these efforts. This is what's behind the current idea of hiring a communications director. We need it. Everybody agrees now that we need it, and I'm sure that if we are successful, let's see, it's going to be very, very helpful for all of us in terms of enhancing our capacity to communicate, to reach out to stakeholders, to do what we need to do for the public interest. Developing standards is not an end in itself, otherwise it's just an academic work. If we are here developing very nice standards, wonderful standards, robust standards, but they are not used, they are not known, they are not understood, they are absolutely unuseful, and we are just spending money without any impact and any contribution to the public interest. So I think that this explains, and I think that each one of us is in a different position, and that's the response to one of you. I think it was you, sorry, Mark, about the future sharing of resources, etc. Of course, this is always in our mind. We discussed that, the three of us, for instance, and Ken as well, but the three of us, we discussed that, of course, in an ideal world, in the future, we will have shared resources. The truth is that these two boards, with all the collaboration, etc., are at different stages of development, understanding, etc. IESBA is lagging much behind. So we need to do a different and major effort, and the message is also very much more difficult to pass. Accounting is accounting. Assurance is assurance. Audit is audit. It's very, very, very objective. Can be complex from the technical perspective, but that's a technical thing. Explaining ethics and independence is a completely different thing, and I tell you that we are all struggling to finding the right way of making people understand what this is. Assurance is mandatory, so people say, okay, we have to take it, let's take it. Ethics should be, and is in some countries also mandatory, but that's the reason.
Thank you, Gabriella. I think it is really obviously very important that we don't write standards that nobody adopts and that nobody applies, and therefore it is really important to make sure that people understand it. And it's ultimately not about the piece of paper, it's about the impact and the operationalization. We were all falling over the word, and I got it right yesterday, but today I'm struggling with it. So it's all about that. That's very important. Paul, I'm going to go to you, and then Gabriella, after you've responded to Paul, let's also talk a little bit about firm culture and governance, but Paul first. Thank you.
Yeah, mine's more of an observation than it is a question. In the sustainability space in particular, there's lots of issues flying around. There are certainly standard setting questions, there are public policy questions, there are regulatory questions, there are corporate governance questions, there are inevitably going to be application questions and the like. And I think it is really important that we be disciplined and focus on the things that are standard setting questions and not try to address some broader public policy questions through standard setting, because historically that has had a tendency to end up diluting the quality of the standards themselves. So I think it's really important that we stay focused on questions that are standard setting questions with an objective of having standards that are going to facilitate high-quality reporting and high-quality assurance by independent assurance provider. That has to be the objective of the process. And
Thank
the
you,
other
Paul. That is
questions
really-
can be addressed by others in their appropriate forum.
That is really important, and we've said it before, as you know, at the PIOB, there are things that are really important and in the public interest, but that is things for regulators to solve. So at the most, what we can do is engage with regulators and say it's for you to think about how do you make this mandatory, how do you monitor, how do you implement. It's a very good bridge as well into talking about firm culture and governance, because that is a really big area where there's different specific jurisdictional requirements, and there are things that are up to the regulators to solve how they think, but they're really important standard setting aspects. So I think it leads very nicely into talking about firm culture and governance. And that was also the comment that I made earlier on, that came through our discussion, is what is let's add Paul's word, what is the standard setting problem to solve? What can the ethics code do in solving potentially or improving some of the aspects around firm culture and governance when it comes to independence and behavior of potentially not just auditors but others in a firm as well. So I'm going to hand over to you again, and then maybe again after your slides we can just pause for comments and questions. We're going to have to speed it up and be a little bit disciplined that we can finalize this within the next 35 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Olinda. So as you suggested a few minutes ago, it's good to start with a endpoint, and the question is, what's the public interest issue that we are trying to address? The public interest issue that we are trying to address is something related with we can't identify yet one specific public interest issue, but it's for sure a public interest issue that unethical behaviors keep on happening irrespective of the many standards, the many rules, the many things that have been done to address those issues. There is a perception, and it was something that our stakeholders brought to us during the consultation on the strategy and work plan, with a lot of evidence and discussed by the board, that there must be something, or there is probably something related with the firms themselves, with their culture and with their governance, which creates some rooms or some incentives, or there are some incentives lacking. There must be something that creates space, room for these unethical behaviors to persist. It's not. It's more than just the individual behaviors and the reasons for the individual behaviors. It's not about the bad apples or just about the bad apples. It's about the apple tree. And the question is there something? Of course, the public interest requires that we address, if possible and if necessary, all the problems and all the issues that can contribute to unethical behaviors that harm the public interest. So the idea of this project is to identify possible gaps, wrong incentives, problems, possible improvements, mostly, that can help mitigate, limit, reduce the space for unethical behaviors. So with this in mind, and I recognize that this is complex and that this is huge, but we considered, and I think that our stakeholders have been very, very supportive in that respect, that IESBA, as an ethics standard setter, should not shy away from addressing this topic, whatever is going to be the result. We also understood that it was necessary to do a lot of outreach, to hear from the very many parts, the very many stakeholders, to understand the problems, the possible solutions, where we are going, where the firms are going to solve some of the solutions, which responses are there already in place that can be taken higher, and made applicable to all the firms instead of being individual and specific solutions of some of the firms. So we don't want to boil the ocean, but we need to understand everything so that after this process of understanding, research, fact-finding, hearing, listening, discussing, we are able to do two things. Well, and this list, I'm not going to go into the details. A lot of outreach has been undertaken in very many places. Everybody wants to speak about this topic everywhere. We go somewhere, we want to talk about sustainability. People want to talk about firm culture and governance. And everybody thinks that they have something to say about this. So it's really important that we are able to screen what's important and what's not important. To support some of this work, we also asked an academic to do some research and offer us the comfort of someone who has been working in this space for a long time in terms of concepts, in terms of understanding the issues in companies, and etc. So that's what we did with the academic. We got an academic report by the Dr. Eva Tsahu-Ridu from Australia. And it was her that brought this idea that sometimes the problems are not about the bad apples, it's about the bad barrels. And if you have a bad barrel, the apples can be a very good quality, but then there are things which create problems inside. So with this, all these discussions and this outreach, there were already a number of topics which were identified as possible sources of problems, sources of unethical behaviors, issues that create an incentive or a good space, a good environment for unethical behaviors. And these topics are mentioned there. I could speak about each one of them in detail, but I won't unless you want to know something else about some of them. But these were the topics that we were able to identify as consistent, or not consistent across all the conversations, but that from the very intensive outreach that we are undertaking came up as being possible important topics in this respect. Now, I have to make clear here, and thank you for the comments about standard setting and etc. I have to make clear that we are not suggesting that the IESBA, as a standard setter, is going to address all these topics individually, in a way or another. It means that we need to have a map of the problems, of the possible problems, and do two things. Understand which of these problems are really relevant, and from these problems or issues, or opportunities, because some of them are not problems, are opportunities, among them, which are the ones that IESBA as a standard setter can and should address. So we are not saying that the IESBA is going to do work on all this. But this also means that it is probably important to highlight these topics that others, not the IESBA, may want to address, and leave that challenge to others. So this is the process that we are undertaking, a big picture of what's in there in the firm's culture and governance that may influence the ethical or unethical behaviors, understand which of them are really relevant, and from them, what can we do as a standard setter with respect to these topics. We don't know yet, and I'm sorry because I think that there is some understandable expectation with respect to a response from the IESBA, but we would not be very professional and wise if after a short period of outreach we were able to tell you, yes, this is what we are going to do, and we have an idea. I can't say much because I never like to go ahead of my board, which has not discussed some ideas that have been, after the June board meeting, are developing, are flourishing. But I can tell you a little bit about what's a possible approach to the work, which is to combine two possible initiatives, a little bit replicating what we did on technology, where we came to the same conclusion. There are a lot of issues, not all of them can be addressed or should be addressed by a standard setting activity. So we produced a lot of significant non-authoritative material, which is being used. We heard it at the IFAC board meeting, someone saying, I use it almost on a daily basis, and we developed standards in parallel. It could be an approach. Have some short-term initiative, non-authoritative material, where some topics could be raised, which are not for us to address, but just tell the others, well, here you have, we did the work, so you regulators, governments, whatever, firms, do whatever you think you have to do in that respect. But we, as standard setters, we identified this and that topic, and we will do something in standard setting. We see the area of governance, I can tell you, as a privileged area of work in the standard set, in the standards. We know that some countries already have their code for audit, governance code for audit firms. It's the case of Japan, it's the case of the UK. It's very helpful, it's being very well received and recognized. So one option, if we come to the conclusion that it is important and it is useful for the public interest, is to develop something in that area, in the standards, but still to be seen. We don't want to go into areas which are not our areas. We don't want to cover areas which are specifically for the corporate governance community or regulators or whatever, but we want to do the job of identifying the problems and say, okay, these are the problems, this is where IESBA can be relevant in helping solving the problems. And the approach that we are going to discuss next week or in 2 weeks in the task force meeting is something along these lines. Let's see, and probably in September we will have a very much more concrete idea of the work that we are planning to do and suggesting to do. And I pause here. And this is the timeline.
Thank you. And Gabriela, maybe it's worthwhile to go to the previous slide, just to keep that open while we go for comments and questions. I'm going to go to Tom and to Dave. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I attended the June meeting, and then the research on the firm culture governance, very extensive, very informative, and a very good start to have a discussion. I would like to repeat some of the points which was raised in the June discussion. This is a burning platform. And the interest point raised in the June discussion is that the relationship with the private equity investment, which has an other session, but I think that the board thinking it is that this is very another burning issue, and then have some sort of the impact on the culture of the firms. So from that perspective, and the Paul's point at the we should focus on the standard setting. So from that perspective, I think that this is a very early stage, and so you say that this will be discussed in the next board, but I have the impression, short term and long term is a little bit the other way around rather than say, because the raising the awareness of the ecosystem, it's some long term and a little bit out of the remit of the standard setting. But as you say, that the governance or the structure, especially ethical structure of the governance, covering not only the audit but covering other service lines, might be the I'm sure it is the remit within the standard setting. So it is. My personal impression is it should be the other way around. So could you give me your rationale or background of thinking of this way of the structure? Thank you.
Well,
Thanks. Let me first go to Dave.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Gabriela, for your comments. I think this is an incredibly important project. I also don't think it will be done quickly, because irrespective of the elements of the code that are already out there, we still see repeatedly these unethical behaviors around the world. It's not in any one jurisdiction. One of the thoughts, and this may be more of a comment than a question, but one of the thoughts that I had is, as you think about this, as you gather information, and maybe the academic report that you got addresses this, but one of the ways that I think about this is it possible for us to try to define what are the elements of a highly ethical organization? And then from there, go and look at, with respect to the code, and I appreciate your comments it will include all of those stakeholders that you had on the other slide. You don't have control over everything, but the question would be, what might be missing from the code that is going to enable or I don't know what the right word is, but more than just enable, but really help organizations to achieve that on a daily basis. And some of that will be, do you have the right positive activities in there, but some of them are what are some of the negative influences that, and how might those be addressed, if at all, in the code. And to the extent they can't be, I think as part of this, identifying, what other stakeholders might have a role in this to identify that would be good. But I just wonder if there's a possibility of defining sort of the essential elements of a highly ethical organization. It also seems to me that in the end, some of this ought to dovetail with ISQM1 and the quality standard management, the quality management standards, said that backwards, that so that organizations also have a way to assure the ongoing implementation of those elements of it, to the extent, again, that they're in the code. And then my last comment is as we see individual unethical activity around the globe, we sometimes jump to a conclusion or jump to a solution, and I'm hopeful that if we could define what the elements of an ethical organization, we won't be walking around with a solution in search of a problem. And that we've already decided that audit only is the right answer, or ring fencing, or whatever it is that's done in different jurisdictions, that's just the right global answer, but rather think about what is the essence of that organization. So that's more of a comment than a question.
Can I go to Janine as well? That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle, for your presentation. And yes, this is an important topic. Everything around driving ethics in the audit sector. In my personal view, I always consider ethics as a sort of prerequisite or precondition to quality. And in the end, we are an auditing or assurance standard setting board, and we have the professional standard setter and the ethical standard setter. And in the end, we want high quality assurance and audit reports that are reliable. So when I listened to your presentation, I was also triggered by when you were responding to the question, like what public interest issue or risk are you trying to solve with this project? You were talking about unethical behaviors, which I understand because my own view is indeed ethical decisions are taken that are often impact quality, and that's. But my question is also, how do you see this? Are you focusing on the audit firm in the bigger accounting firm? We have audit firms that have a license, but they are in a network with tax, consulting. Are you looking at it as the whole firm, as it's often referred to in the newspapers? And then they mean also when it's tax or consulting, that something happened there. Or are you really focusing your project only on where the assurance and audit is happening? That's a question I have. And when I look at your the slide, the key themes observed from stakeholders' input, I was thinking, actually, I think it's striking that I miss a few things like strategy, structure, things that drive behaviors, because if ethics or quality is not embedded in strategy, it might not get the attention it should get, or the structure in the firms. Dave already talked about, or Tom about private equity, but also structures in a sense. They're now multidisciplinary firms, mostly. So did you get also some stakeholder input on those topics, or is that something you don't want to touch upon? That was another question I have. I also want to stress the private equity and the impact that it has currently in many countries, that it's really an important topic that I would say is more for the shorter term to address those things than for the longer term. Thank you.
And it's probably all in unpacking this and then deciding which ones are your responsibility or not within standard setting. So back to you, Gabriella. And then I think we can wrap up on this because I know you've got a few more slides after that, if I'm not mistaken.
This topic.
Yes, on the other topics, yes, yeah. So over to you.
If I may, Tom, private equity, yes, as you know, this is a topic that has been being addressed at our board since for 2 meetings already. So it's very much top of mind for us, but it has to be, it's so complex that it's probably needs to be subject to a specific reflection, and at this point in time, not just one of the topics among the topics. But we take the note, we know that this is a matter of concern. We saw from the presentations that we had at the board, at the SAC and at the board, that this is an extremely complex topic, so complex that I would say it's so complex that it must be risky. Because the complexity that we saw even in addressing the topics is what it is. So thank you, note taken, it's not forgotten, on the contrary, it's very much top of mind. And then the short term versus long term, it's an interesting perspective, and nothing has been decided. This is that slide shows the product of some reflection that will be discussed by the task force and then by the board, so we have a way to go. We will see your point, and that it's also a little bit Janine's point. But I think that my immediate reaction is that standard setting is by nature a long-term project. Unfortunately, sometimes, but we can't do anything without going through the due process, and the due process, even if we are very, very, very focused, is what it is. So it's always a long-term project. While NAM, non-authoritative material, depending on what we want to do, and looking again to what we have done with technology, we had 2 groups working in parallel, one in standard setting, the other developing non-authoritative material, and it was faster to go out with something saying the world, well, these are the problems, these are the issues, these are the ideas, and then keep developing the standards at the same time. Nothing is written on the stump, so we will take that back for consideration, also because, again, this has not been approved. And thank you for the note. Dave, I'll take it back. I think it's a very interesting perspective. I think that what you are saying is, instead of looking at the problems and trying to understand what the issue is, starting the other way around, defining a highly ethical entity, firm, and then seeing what's missing to make sure that these elements are achieved. Thank you very much for that suggestion. Personally, I liked it very much. So it's probably going to be very helpful to make us turn a little bit the thought process around, and can be very helpful also from the understandability point of view. So I don't think that you had a question, but my response is yes. I think it's a very interesting perspective. We will explore it for sure. And Janine, which firms? Firms here, it's accounting firms in their entirety. So covering tax, consulting, everything. Whatever, it's the way we are addressing this. It's not audit firms, even if we know that most of the people want to speak about audit, but we are seeing from some concrete, very practical examples that the problems are wider than just in the accounting part of the firms, if not more relevant in the other parts of the firms. Again, this relates with our project of expanding the scope of the code as well. Doesn't make sense that we address the problem for the audit part of the big firms. We need to go to address them holistically and considering all the activities inside the firms. So it's accounting firms. It's not audit inside accounting firms.
It's the network.
Yeah, it's the network. It's the network with
It's the
all the
code
complexities
version.
that it brings as well. So it's not that we are not. Going back to the second question, strategy and structure. Structure relates with private equity, relates with the network, relates with very many things. We are very well aware that there are things related with structure that we can't do. It would be very nice to say you should not have that structure, you should have a different structure, but we can't, this is not for us. We can flag, and non-authoritative material or whatever, we can flag the problems. Whoever is responsible can solve them, but we are not wanting to boil the water and go beyond what's our competence, responsibility, and capacity, ability, mandate as a standard setter. So, but this is definitely an area where we will have to see if there is anything that the IESBA, as an ethics standard setter, should and can do, because we know it's a source of concerns. And I think that I responded to all the questions.
Thank you, Gabriella. And maybe just in conclusion, before you go to your last few slides, maybe just to emphasize that at the PIOB, we are not trying to put any pressure on you to come up and telling us what you're going to do immediately. This probably more than anything else for a while is really important to scope appropriately and to scope with Dave's advice. I thought was really important is what is the ideal end state? What is the characteristics, elements of ethical network firm? If that's the focus, what are the gaps then in the code to deal with that? I would just maybe also say when it comes to the governance of ethics, there's quite a lot of literature out there in the governance community on that, and that might be worthwhile to have a look at, because some of that might be quite useful for what you think you might deal with. I saw in some of the observation notes, it's almost, the one or two, let's call it silver bullets, a solution looking for a problem. Independent non-executives, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that might be a solution looking for a problem. That might just be one of the things that can help, but there might be a whole bigger philosophy around that. And then the one other comment that I would just make, and it links to the comment that Tom made about must those two things be the other way around. I think it's really important for IESBA to, once you understand looking at this ecosystem or looking at these themes, what the areas are that you should address as part of standard setting, to decide what's the priority and to do that first. Because it's sometimes easy to say, let's sort of talk about all of this and tell other people what we think their responsibility is and what we're not going to do, but let's just really focus on what's the most important burning item that can be addressed, and rather put resources to the most important priority, which might result in getting to what Tom is saying, maybe some of those things that are on the long-term block, and it might take longer. But maybe some of those things will then get priority without preempting what the outcome is going to be. So I'll pause there and let you go back to your slides on collective investment schemes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you very much to all of you. And of course, I'm not complaining about any pressure. I'm just explaining the pace. And these conversations are actually very helpful because they help us shape gradually the approach and the project and the scope. So everything is very clear here, and thank you for the very good insights and comments that we received here, which we will take back and for sure make something very good from these comments. Now, on the next comment, on the next part of the last part of the presentation on CIVs, as this group know, as the PIOB knows, we started a project on CIVs. We approved the terms of reference in December, in a very difficult time for us. It's the first staff-driven project, so we have staff working on it, of course, in close relationship with the board. There is one board member which is always providing support and acting as a sounding board and etc. But still, of course, we are learning how to do this of the staff-driven project. It's important to make sure that there are points of contact with the board, and that the board does not get absolutely surprised by the project. So this is a learning process, but it's from that perspective, I think it's going well, and that we took some lessons from the last meeting in terms of what we need to do and how we need to address this. Now, I'm not going to stick too much to the slides. A lot of outreach, and the outreach is focused mostly on one topic, which is to understand the different structures of the CIVs and pension funds, for the time being mostly CIVs, in the very different jurisdictions, because there are so many different structures, approaches, etc., that it's difficult to capture what they have in common, and that we need to address as a standard setter in terms of independence considerations. So there is the main problem. Maybe I'll go to this slide. Maybe it helps clarifying the approach. So to make clear, the objective of this work stream is to ensure that independence provisions in the code, which exist in the ethics code, and related entity definitions in the code, are fit for purpose for CIVs and pension funds, taking into consideration the very specific structures that these entities have. This, namely, the provisions on relations with third parties and threats and risks coming from the relation with third parties, was very much drafted and addressing and targeting issuers. But issuers have companies have a completely different structure from the funds, CIVs and pension funds. So the purpose of the project is to see if the code is fit for purpose, provides the necessary responses and fit for purpose, tailored responses to CIVs in terms of independence, taking into consideration the very complex relationships of these entities with third parties. It is not, as it is said there, because it is needed to clarify some possible confusions, to reconsider the PI definition. The PI definition project, or the PI project, determined not to include CIVs in the PI definition for reasons that, well, we can speak about them if you want, but that for reasons which were well understood by the PIOB by the time. We made a commitment to address CIVs because still there was a concern that these are important entities, relevant entities, sometimes systemically relevant entities, and we needed to make sure that everything is fit for purpose and that the independence considerations were there, actually ensuring the right level of independence for the auditor of these entities. The public interest issue being addressed is the possible auditor independent issues which could not be captured by the code due to this very unique and specific structure of these entities. So the preliminary topics that were already identified, and some they relate with some independence considerations with respect to third parties related with the CIVs. Again, the complexity of the structures bring a lot of third parties and different third parties to relate with the CIVs, and therefore the independence risks are there and need to be appropriately addressed. This is the scope, this is the objective, this is how the project is evolving, not to reopen the PI definition, which we could not do, and we could not, and it's not supposed that we do it, because it was well agreed and clear that these entities would not make part of the PI definition. And the reasons for that, by the time, I was not there, but I'm well briefed by about what was the discussion and the conclusion, is that on the one hand, CIVs and pension funds are entities which can have completely different impacts in the economy, in investors, etc. You have very, 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 very small CIVs, investment funds, etc. Sometimes there are families, things like that, and you have huge, big investment funds which may have a different impact in in the economy. So the decision, and because the PI definition is a standard which targets regulators and not the firms, it's a different thing, which was decided was to leave to regulators, to the jurisdictions, to policymakers, the decision whether to include CIVs and pension funds in the definition or not, depending on the specificities of each jurisdiction and of each market, and even to select some of these entities to become PI or not becoming PI, and also the firms to treat the entities as PI or not. So this was the decision, but so this project is about a different thing, since they are not PI. And if they were qualified as PI, probably we were still not responding to this question. And the question is because PI is about higher, more stringent requirements in terms of independence, but it's not about specific independence requirements addressing the specific risks that these entities pose because of their complexity and because of the extraordinarily diverse relationships they have with the third parties. So we would have a risk of including the CIVs in the PI definition and still leaving unattended the specific questions that we need to address, which is this fit for purpose for these very specific structures? That's what we are doing. That's what we are looking for. That's what we are testing. The outreach is being very important, and we will still do a lot more because the differences across jurisdictions is very, very, very significant. So we need to make sure that there is nothing left out that we should capture before we start deciding what to do, if anything. First, we will have to come to the conclusion that the standards are fit for purpose or not, if there is any space for us to do any adjustments in the standards to capture what they need to capture. That's it.
Thank you very much, Gabriella. I'm not going to open this one up for comment for two reasons. The one is, in the interest of time, I'm going to share our comments with you, which we have in any event spoken about a little bit in your preparation, and I think you've addressed some of those questions. But it is something that still will run its course, and there's still quite a bit of work to do on that. So maybe just a few sort of closing remarks, and I'll then circle back to you, that we can close the session. This is obviously very important for the PIB. When we in those days, it was like a second approval. We now certify the work at the time done by IESBA. It was really important for us as well that you circle back to these structures, which of course was very hard to fit into the PI definition because of, as you say, the local peculiarities of how they are governed, but also because you often get really big ones and then you get small ones. And for a global code to define or stratify which ones must be in and which ones must be out, considering what's happening in all the countries, is absolutely impossible. So what you said to us, and we battled with this, I mentioned it to you and I thought you addressed it, so why are you not reopening the PI definition, is because those difficulties have not gone away. So to reopen the PI definition to try and fit it into there is not going to help because it's still the same problem. But and also the PI definition is only becoming effective, implementable next year or towards the end of this year. But having said that, the problem is not so much the PI definition. The problem is, are we comfortable that there are not big ones here that are not sufficiently dealt with in the independence requirements for auditors, and you explained that very well, that is what you're focusing on. So I think that is really good, and it's really important that you do that work. We do believe it's important, and you have started doing outreach and understanding and so on, but that you have a really good grip and a lot of information. Previously with IESBA, before it was under your leadership, we asked IESBA leadership to go back and say, make sure you've got the information to support your decision to do that bottom-up approach. So I know you're working on it, but I just want to emphasize to say, make sure you've got sufficient information to support how you believe you're going to deal with it. Or maybe if the answer is you don't need to deal with it, then especially you need sufficient information to support ultimately your conclusions and that. And I think the one other thing that we spoke about when I sort of gave you a heads up about the things that we're struggling is just also somewhere along the line we will talk again about just clarifying the need to clarify maybe in the definition or otherwise that issue about the ranking of the definition versus the local laws, which is sort of embedded subtly in the PI definition, but not always clear. But I know you're doing some work, and it becomes really relevant when it deals with the coordination between the adjustments that Thomas also make his board do when it comes to the PI definition and the IESBA. Just the clarity on how do we make sure that that definition and that ranking of the definition is very clear versus local jurisdiction. So I'll maybe pause there, check if there's anything from your side before we go into the next session.
Thank you very much, Linda. No, just confirming that yes, we are clarifying, we are about to clarify even better the PI definition, and we will do everything that is necessary to make sure that there is full clarity and full consistency with what Tom and I will do, what is necessary to ensure full consistency between the two concepts. So I think that if there is still any problem, it will be solved very soon. And nothing else. Thank you very much for this very good conversation. I'll take a lot of insights back for us to process and digest and work on them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you. I just want to see if I can see Ken's face on the screen. Ken is going to be around for the next session as well, but thank you, Ken, as well. And we've got Cam here. Thank you for the work by the staff and your team and your board. Thank you, Gabriella. And we're not going to let you go yet because we're going to go. And there's Willie as well. So welcome, Willie. You're just in time for the next session. We're going to go. I know some of you might be desperate for caffeine, but you're going to have to work a little bit harder before you can get a coffee break. We've got another session. Are you okay that we continue with the other session? You think that's appropriate? It's not going to be all that long.